What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of After the Whistle. Conference Championship weekend has come and gone. And we got some chaos scenarios that came off the back end of it, which I said last week could potentially happen. We had Duke beat Virginia in overtime, along with some surprises. Indiana beating Ohio State 13-10. I feel like 99% of America was wrong on that. I feel like the only people really that felt like Indiana had a chance was Indiana fans. And I didn't even know they existed until like this year. So, I mean, we had Georgia just, built to you-know-what against Alabama. We'll talk about all these, games and recap them more in detail here in just a few minutes. First things first, welcome back. If you're a continued listener, if you've listened to this show multiple times, welcome back. If it's your first time, welcome to the show. I want to shout out everybody. I know I talked about it on the last episode, some of the Spotify Wrapped metrics. It's all due to the people that listen to the show. The metrics don't go up unless you listen, unless you tell people to listen, unless you click the follow button, unless you click the subscribe button, which is free, by the way. In case you haven't noticed and you haven't subscribed to the show, you haven't followed the show on any of these platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music, or Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music. If you haven't subscribed or liked on any of those platforms, please do. It's free to do so. There's no subscription fee or anything like that. Be sure to do that. That way, we can have a better year in 2026. I mean, if the numbers keep trending in the direction they are from last year to this year to next year, we're looking at a pretty big year for 2026. So let's talk about the CFP rankings. The final rankings and the bracket has been released for the college football playoff as of today. We're going to go through it, and we're going to start at 25. I'm just going to give you the full 25 top 25 rankings, and then we're going to actually go into the bracket and the CFP, along with some things that were talked about today on TV, on ESPN, and some interesting points that were raised as it pertains to these last and final rankings before the playoff starts. So we're going to start things off at 25, North Texas. James Madison at 24, Iowa at 23, Georgia Tech at 22, Houston 21, Tulane 20, Virginia at 19, Michigan at 18, Arizona at 17, USC at 16, Utah at 15, Vanderbilt 14, Texas 13, BYU 12, Notre Dame 11, Miami 10, Alabama 9, Oklahoma 8, Texas A&M 7, Ole Miss 6, Oregon 5, Texas Tech 4, Georgia 3, Ohio State 2, Indiana 1. So moving into this bracket. So now we have 1 seed Indiana after I wouldn't really call it a beatdown, but it was a very convincing win, even though it was only a field goal win for Indiana. But Indiana, the number 1 seed coming out of championship weekend. Ohio State, the 2 seed. Essentially, the committee just flip-flopped those. Whether or not you agree with it or not, I kind of was shocked by it, honestly. But if anything, I feel like the eye test of conference championship weekend and how good Georgia looked, maybe you could make the argument for Georgia to be at 2 and Ohio State to be at 3. That would ultimately put them on opposite sides of the bracket. But when we get to this point, it's kind of, you have certain circumstances where the path is easier for some teams and some teams it's not, so you don't really think, Georgia being ranked 2 and Georgia being ranked 3 or vice versa with Ohio State. You really don't think that it makes the path much worse. So, I mean, to me, it sounds like it's like a trivial matter to really complain about. It really is. Like, I mean, I know people that were like, why are we number 2? Why is Georgia number 2? I mean, I told people, I've been talking to people all weekend about this, and I said, if Indiana beats Ohio State, they're really just going to swap places. And people are like, no, they'll drop back to 3rd or 4th. I'm like, no, this isn't the AP. That's not how it works. Like, they're not going to drop Ohio State back. Now, if Indiana would have beat Ohio State as bad as Bama, or as bad as Georgia beat Bama, perhaps. But, it didn't happen like that. It was a close game, 13-10 the final, and it was, Ohio State missed a 27-yard field goal, that would have potentially tied the game and perhaps sent it to overtime, and maybe we get a different result in overtime. Who knows? But either way, they just swapped places in there. So the 3 seed Georgia, dominant win against Alabama. Alabama held to -3 rushing yards. First time that's happened since, I believe, 1960, if I remember right. It's been a long time. And just a dominant performance by Georgia. Nobody in this bracket wants to see that version of the Georgia Bulldogs in the playoff. I can guarantee you that. The number 4 seed, Texas Tech. After, I called it on the prediction show last week. I said this game's going to be a blowout, BYU. I don't think it's going to be much different than it was last time. It was actually worse than it was last time. The final score in that one, 34-7, Texas Tech over BYU. So 29-7 was the score in the first matchup. 34-7 was the score in the second matchup. So, pretty similar result there. The 5 seed, Oregon, getting a home playoff game against the James Madison Dukes. So Dukes versus Ducks in that one. We have the 6 seed, Ole Miss Rebels. Did not move. They did not move in the rankings after the coach left. They've been holding steady, so they're still there. They will be playing Tulane in Oxford. So home playoff game, biggest game in the history of Ole Miss football. So good for them. 7 seed will be Texas A&M, and we will see Miami go on the road to College Station to play Texas A&M. The first round games, that's probably the one I'm looking forward to the most. Just because we've seen Miami kind of be on this little bit of an upswing to finish the season. I feel like a lot of people would agree with that. A little bit of a progression there for Miami to finish out this season. I want to see how they perform against a team like Texas A&M. So excited for that one. The 8 seed will be the Oklahoma Sooners, and they will play the 9 seed Alabama. Alabama going to Norman, Oklahoma to play there. And I know, people, I saw a bunch of people posting online, a bunch of people on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever, about Alabama not moving. They were 9 going into the SEC championship. They were 9 coming out after the loss. And the committee almost made it, they talked about how they weren't going to punish teams for making an extra game, or making it to an extra game, earning their way to a conference championship. They weren't going to punish these teams, right? Well, there's still some holes in this committee's arguments, their points that they're trying to make and their arguments. When they say, well, we're not going to punish Alabama, we're not going to punish Alabama for losing to Georgia in the SEC championship. Okay, well, where was that with BYU? So we have way too much of this, and this is something I've been harping on for 4 weeks now. And y'all have heard me on here talking about Miami, talking about how they should be ranked ahead of Notre Dame. Y'all have heard me harp on that for weeks. And here we are, the final set of rankings. We have a BYU team lose in a conference championship game, mind you. They get bumped back a slot, which opens up the door for Miami to move into that slot. Now Miami and Notre Dame are right next to each other in the rankings, right? The College Football Playoff Committee chair goes on TV this morning, says that they didn't analyze these two teams until they got next to each other in the rankings. And they said when they got next to each other in the rankings, then they would look at the head-to-head. Why didn't we look at the head-to-head the whole time? This is the scenario. This is why nobody likes the committee. And this is why nobody trusts the committee. This is why every year we have controversy. We have this team get left out, that team get left out. We constantly are having issues. The double standard, they constantly will talk you in circles. They'll gaslight you into thinking, this and that. I mean, it's like it's unreal. The corners that the committee backs themselves into, and instead of just owning up to making mistakes, it's like they try to fight their way out of the corner, and it doesn't look good. When we say, well, we had Notre Dame ranked ahead of Miami for the last month, because Notre Dame via the eye test looked like a better football team than Miami. But once Miami got moved up in the rankings and got next to Notre Dame, then we had to look at the head-to-head. It's bullcrap. Why weren't we looking at it from the jump, from the get-go? Because Miami beat Notre Dame. We've got a 9-3 Texas team ahead of a 10-2 Vanderbilt team in the rankings because of a head-to-head. They don't even have similar records. So the holes in here, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I feel like a lot of teams that made the playoff, there's an argument to be like, who deserves to make the playoff, who doesn't deserve to make the playoff. There's arguments to be had across the board on that. Don't get me wrong. But I just want consistency. And, they're going to end up expanding the playoff because it means more money for TV networks, revenue for the schools. They're going to end up expanding it to 16 teams or maybe whatever. I don't know. Eventually that's going to happen. So prepare yourself. And I know we had issues with the 4-team playoff. I know we had issues with the 4-team. But we didn't have to sit here and argue losses. I don't understand that. I've never understood the argument of you got a coach that goes on game day or that goes on ESPN, that Skypes in or whatever. And he's like, yeah, we're 10-2, but look who we lost to. You lost. You're a loser. You lost twice. Like, you want to make it to the playoff? Don't lose. I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to try to listen to someone justify losses. No, you play to win the game, Herm Edwards. Am I wrong? Or have we just come in? I'm trying to get my words right. I'm flustered. Have we just gotten to this point in society, in football, where we got just a crop full of losers? I don't understand it. Not once have you heard a guy like Kirby Smart talk about the loss to Alabama early in the season and talk about, well, yeah, but that's a quality loss. That's a good loss. No loss. A loss is a bad loss, regardless of who it's to. I don't care if you lose to the number 1 team in the country or the number 10 team in the country or the number 20 team in the country. A loss is a loss. But we've literally got a 9-3 team that lost to a 4-8 team. Texas, shut up. You didn't earn your way into the playoff. I don't care if you beat Ohio State to start the season. You've got 3 losses, and one of them was to a 4-8 team. There's the door. Run through it. Man, all weekend I've had to hear these arguments. It's like a canoe with holes all in the bottom. 3 holes to be exact. Like, Texas fans, listen, you had your shot. If you beat Florida, guess what? You're there. You're in the playoff if you beat Florida. It sounds simple. And with the talent that you had, it should have been. But it wasn't. So, sit at home on the couch and watch the playoff and enjoy it. And understand that you have to get better and not lose games that you shouldn't lose. Good God. Either way, though, I feel like this is going to be an interesting playoff. We've got some really good matchups, some rematches. In the first round, you got Tulane Ole Miss, which is, essentially a rematch. Ole Miss just, beat the crap out of them last time they played. They're going to do it again. So we got 2 Group of 5 teams in the playoff, which is something we'll talk about here in just a minute. But and then you got a rematch of Alabama-Oklahoma. And, I know people are saying, well, Oklahoma's just going to take care of business again. I wouldn't be so sure because, this is an Alabama team that'll be a little charged up after getting embarrassed on national TV by the Georgia Bulldogs. So this might be an Alabama team that's a little charged up. Give them a couple weeks to get healthy in some areas. Maybe you get your running back, whatever. But you also got to think this is an Alabama team that committed 3 turnovers in the last meeting against Oklahoma. An Oklahoma team that has a non-existent offense. Like I've yet to see, I think, a team make the playoff that has a more putrid offense than Oklahoma. It's disgusting. And they're there. And, the main reason they're there is because of that defense. But either way, it's a rematch that I'm interested to see. The winner gets Indiana. So the winner celebrate for just a little while, type thing there. But, when we look at this bracket and we look down, first round matchups, of course you're going to have a couple blowouts. Oregon's going to blow the doors off of JMU. Likewise, Ole Miss is going to blow the doors off of Tulane. So when we look at the bracket, we look at those two, and then you got an Alabama going to Norman, you got a Miami going to College Station. So those are the 2 matchups that everybody's really looking forward to. The other matchups are just consolation prizes for the Group of 5 teams. They'll get in. James Madison's going to go to Eugene. They're going to get beat by 30. They're going to get their little participation trophy or whatever. They're going to get to do their media. They're going to get their fancy little quarter zip jackets with the college football playoff logo on them. They'll get all the merch, but let's just get, like I said a few weeks ago, let's just have a Group of 5 playoff. Seriously. This is wasting everybody's time. You do not have the controversy that you have if you don't have the Group of 5, if you don't include the Group of 5 teams. You don't. Now, some of this is to blame. The ACC is to blame for some of this. Because you produced a 7-5 unranked conference champ. Because your conference is dog water, top to bottom. Aside from Miami, I think. We'll see. But you have a 7-5 conference champ that essentially opened the door for another Group of 5 school, because it's the 5 highest ranked conference champs. Well, you have the AAC champ, and then you have the Sun Belt champ, both ranked. So here we are. One's ranked 20th, one is 24th, and they are the 11th seed and the 12th seed in the playoff. Participation trophies. We're handing out 2 of them this year. So, all right, moving on a little bit. Need to do some breathing exercises, get back in the, deep breaths. Just kind of calm down for a minute, because nothing gets me worked up like the College Football Playoff Committee and the arguments that are trying to be made for somebody's team being in the playoff. It's stupid. I hadn't heard it, but either way, Notre Dame gets left out, which is justice is finally served when it comes to that, because Miami should have been ranked ahead of them from day one. Now, here we are a month ago, Miami should have been ranked ahead of Notre Dame. So, but the committee finally got it right. It just took them a while. Shout out to Notre Dame fans. They pretty much thought they were a playoff lock. Sorry about it. So, and then now the news came out today that Notre Dame has opted out of bowl season. So they played their last game of the year here, feels like a month ago now. But Notre Dame season's done. So they're crying about it in South Bend. I mean, whatever. Don't start the season 0-2. And the saying that everybody likes to say, join a conference. I mean, there's a lot of ways that Notre Dame can make this, can be in that discussion. Win. It's just like I was just saying a minute ago. Win. We're analyzing losses. I saw a clip of Marcus Freeman. It's like, well, you look who we lost to. We lost by a combined total of 4 points. L-O-S-T. Lost. You lost. Don't lose the games. It's quite simple, really, when you think about it. I mean, it's not freaking calculus, okay? Like, win the games. Win the games, make the playoff, Really sounds simple when you think about it. But either way, the coddling of these teams and the begging and pleading from coaches like Clark Lee, like Steve Sarkisian, like Marcus Freeman, all these coaches just begging and pleading to be in the playoff. Not like, thank God we're done with that now. Like, we don't have to hear it anymore until next year. We'll hear it from somebody else. But thank God we don't have to hear it anymore for this year. Playoff set, bracket set, and then, here we are gonna get this show on the road here in just a couple weeks. So excited for it. It'd be a little bit of an understatement for me, because I'm really excited to see this. December 20th, the whole thing's going to kick off. So recap. Conference championship weekend, recapping some games. The games we picked. Went 4-2. Went 4-2 this weekend overall. You probably know which games I picked. If you listened to the prediction show last Thursday, you know which games I picked that didn't pan out like I said. So, but we'll start things off. The American Championship, Tulane over North Texas 34-21. Like John Summerall and that squad just, they did what they were supposed to do. I mean, North Texas was a story all year, explosive offense, had a, with Drew Mestamaker at quarterback, had a really good run there at North Texas. I mean, you still can't really, 11-2 is not really an end of the year ranked. It's a win for North Texas. Now, you were one win away from potentially making the playoff, and you hate it for the kids, but at the end of the day, a successful season there in North Texas. But, Tulane really won this football game, to me, being the more, because North Texas outgained them, by far, for 15 yards. But the issue is Tulane was just on the attack on defense, forcing turnovers. I mean, 3 interceptions and 2 fumbles, 5 turnovers for North Texas. You're not going to win against anybody with 5 turnovers. That's a death sentence in college football. If you're trying to win a football game, 5 turnovers, no bueno. So that's the key area where North Texas lost this football game, because North Texas really was able to do whatever they wanted against Tulane's defense. This game had potential to be kind of a shootout, because neither defense is primarily great, but it had kind of the recipe, and it had kind of this, feel of it may be a shootout, but unfortunately didn't end up that way. But I still, I'm still impressed with that they scored 21 points with 5 turnovers and giving up that many extra possessions. But likewise, Tulane takes advantage, wins 34-21, makes their way into the college football playoff. The Sun Belt Championship, James Madison, which James Madison by far was one of the best. You could also make the argument they were the best group of 5 team all year as far as consistency. They looked consistently the most dominant and consistently the best out of those schools all season long in their season, in the regular season, really, with a Sun Belt Conference Championship, winning 31-14 over Troy, which, I mean, don't really pay a whole lot of attention to the Group of Five stuff, but from what I've seen of James Madison over the last few weeks, ever since they started getting some playoff buzz, kind of made my way around, looked, and if you watch this James Madison team and you thought Troy had if you thought Troy had a chance, then you clearly weren't watching the same James Madison team that I was watching. A primarily dominant performance for James Madison, 411 yards to Troy's 177, 318 rushing yards for James Madison. -26. Two teams on conference championship weekend had negative rush yards. Two teams. I just gave y'all the first one. Y'all gonna find out who the second one is here in just a minute, in case you already knew. But either way, James Madison, dominant performance, dominant run defense, dominant run offense, and end up winning the Sun Belt Conference Championship behind the legs of Wayne Knight, their star running back there at James Madison. So BYU and Texas Tech, won't spend a whole lot of time on this football game because it really wasn't. It was very uneventful. And I tried to warn y'all, okay? I tried to tell y'all, try to say this is not gonna end well for BYU. There were so many things that had to go right for Brigham Young and so many things that had to go wrong for Texas Tech in order for BYU to have a chance at winning this game. And so, unfortunately, none of that happened. Texas Tech runs away with it. BYU played with a lot of, intensity in the early going. They had a little bit of a fire lit under them. That's to be expected in that spot. We kind of expected them to be a little bit more, inspired, play a little bit more inspired, play a little bit more physical. But then eventually it just, they just ran out of gas early, within the first half, they felt like they ran out of gas. Texas Tech just too deep, too fast, too big. Just BYU couldn't handle them, and Texas Tech runs away with it. But BYU, we talk about successful seasons, and this is definitely one that we can talk about and say successful season for BYU to finish the year 11-2 in the Big 12. Go to the conference championship game. It's definitely not anything that you can hang your head about. You were just a frog's hair away from making the playoff. Whether or not you deserve to be there would be one thing, but if you win the Big 12, obviously you deserve to be there. But successful season for Kalani Sitake and that group, but comes to an end. Unfortunately for that team, just can't turn the ball over in those big games and in those big spots. And you look at the last two times these teams played, and the result was pretty similar. But in two matchups that BYU has had with Texas Tech, they've turned the ball over 7 times in the 2 meetings that they've played against the Red Raiders. And you just can't do that against good competition and expect to win. 4 turnovers in a conference championship game, 4 extra possessions going Texas Tech's way. That it's not, you're not going to overcome that. You just can't. We just talked about that with North Texas and, Tulane, how North Texas had 5 turnovers. You're not overcoming that amount of turnovers when you're giving that many extra possessions away to a team. I don't care what team it is, and I don't care who you're playing. It's not happening. So one of the nightmare scenario for the ACC was avoided because the committee finally got things right and put Miami in the playoff over Notre Dame. But the nightmare scenario was almost true. It almost came true. Duke beats Virginia in overtime 27-20. Virginia comes back, ties the game with less than a minute left. forces overtime, go to overtime, Duke scores, makes it 27-20. Virginia gets the ball back. And I understand these coaches are paid millions of dollars, right? They know what they're doing to a certain extent, right? They get paid to coach a football team. But let me just go ahead and say, the play call that Virginia had on their first possession in that overtime, or their possession in that first overtime, was moronic. Why are we running a trick play there? I mean, you didn't really, your quarterback really didn't have time to, set his feet, make a good throw. Receivers are downfield. They're not open. Tried to force it. I mean, it's just everything that could have gone wrong went wrong in that spot. But why run that play in that spot? It's first down. I mean, it's 1st and 10. You're on your 25. Why are we running that? I don't know if they saw something they liked or what, or if Duke was in a defense that they thought that they could take advantage of. I don't know. But just a wild play call. And Duke wins the ACC at 7-5. I mean, what a time to be alive. 2025 has been a wild year, y'all. You got a 7-5 football team winning a conference championship. It just goes to show you how bad the ACC is, because Virginia's really not that good of a football team. Virginia was going to go to the playoff and get smoked. Make no mistake about it. Like, Virginia was going to go to the playoff and get the doors blown off of them by somebody. But that's the best that the ACC had to offer. I mean, because the other ACC teams were too busy losing. Miami lost key matchups. Can't do it. Lost to Louisville and SMU. If Miami splits those games and loses to one and doesn't lose to the other, they're in the conference championship. Miami's by far and away the best team in the ACC. Oh, but they didn't win the ACC championship. Okay, spot the ball and line Miami and Duke up today. What's the spread? 15 points, 14.5, 16.5? It'd be big. Trust me. Miami would smoke Duke. The way that the Miami's been playing over the last 2 or 3 weeks, that's what we would see. So the ACC got a team in the playoff. It's the best team in the conference. It's just not the, quote, conference champion, the Duke Blue Devils. Which, I mean, it's something for them to celebrate. And that's great. Shout out to Duke, Something for them to celebrate, but 7-5, celebrating okay. I'm gonna get off of that. I'm gonna get off of that soapbox when I talk about that, because the ACC just god awful, man, terrible this year. So the 2 marquee matchups, Big Ten championship, SEC championship. We'll start with the Big Ten championship. Talk about the fact that I'm not too afraid sometimes to admit when I'm wrong, and when I'm definitely wrong, and I was horribly wrong about the Big Ten championship. I honestly thought that Ohio State was going to run away with this one, win by a couple scores. But that I did not know how good Indiana's defense was until I saw them play Saturday night. And I know that y'all might, maybe you think the same. Maybe you saw the same thing I did. But I saw a really good defense. I mean, and they've shown some. Now they're numbers wise, they look good. Now, I mean, numbers wise, they're top 10 in a lot of key metrics. But it's hard, y'all. It's hard to judge a team when they're playing Maryland, UCLA, Indiana State, Kennesaw State, Old Dominion, like just not really playing a whole lot of, top competition. And before the Big Ten fans come at me on that one, one of the star players in your conference agrees with that sentiment. They said there's only like Caleb Downs, safety for Ohio State, said, the difference in the SEC and the Big Ten, the SEC, you're playing, a physical team every weekend. Big Ten, you've got like 4 or 5 games you have to really get up for. His words, not mine. Just saying. Big Ten fans, don't get butthurt. Just saying. But what a win for Curt Cignetti, and what a win for Indiana and Fernando Mendoza. What a win for them. The coaching job that Curt Cignetti has done over the last couple years is amazing. I mean, you're talking about historically one of the worst teams in college football history by way of win percentage, by way of, accolades and what they've won over the years. You're talking about just historically an awful program. I mean, 3 years ago, look at an overhead shot of Indiana's stadium when they're playing even a conference game. Look at an overhead shot at kickoff. Just a ton of empty seats. And just the complete 180. It's not a 360. Can't stand it when people say that. But the complete 180 that football program has done over the last couple years is amazing. And, a lot of most of that is to do to Curt Cignetti. Just to be able to take something that was just stuck in the mud and just flip it around. And now here they are. 13-0 and, Big Ten champ. Just a, monumental day for Indiana to beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten. But where did they win it, you ask? I'm glad you asked, because I'm going to tell you. They didn't win in time of possession. Ohio State had the upper hand in that metric. They had more penalties than Ohio State. They had the same amount of turnovers. But here's where, very similar on total yards, here's where the game's won. Indiana ran the football just good enough to have the balance on offense that they needed. And when you look at these rushing numbers, you look at 118 yards on 34 carries for Indiana. Not exactly lighting it up, but it was just enough to keep this Ohio State defense honest. They had just enough runs, that broke into the second level. It was just enough to keep this defense honest. And that was allowed Fernando Mendoza to, make the throws. It kind of kept the defense honest on play action. They weren't able to get too aggressive. And then you look on the other side of that coin and you look at Ohio State with 58 rush yards on 26 carries. Just not a good night at the office for that Ohio State rushing attack. Just that to me is the key area, is just the fact that they had enough balance. They had enough balance on offense to keep that Ohio State defense from being too aggressive, kept them on their toes just enough. Also, though, another reason they lost this game, and it's the elephant in the room here. We want to dive into the analytics. We want to dive into the statistics. We want to see the numbers. But another glaring point that I'd like to make, and this is hypothetical, but if Ohio State's kicker makes a 27-yard field goal, they go to overtime at 13-13. Who knows what happens after that? Ohio State could win it. Who knows, right? What is it about Ohio State kickers? Just big moments, they just choke it away, man. Because I texted some friends of mine in a group message when that kick was missed. I text some friends of mine in a group message. I said, an Ohio State kicker missing a kick they got to have wide left. I said, that looks familiar. Because if you get what I'm picking up, if you're picking up what I'm putting down here, that's, similar, not a similar distance kick, but the kick looked pretty similar to the one that Ohio State tried to make to beat Georgia a few years ago in the Peach Bowl to go to the national championship game. So wide left, Ohio State, everybody wants to say Ohio State's the new Alabama. I've seen that over the last couple weeks. Maybe they are, dominant team, but can't get a kicker for some reason. Alabama was like that for a little while. If y'all remember, Alabama was like, they had, NFL talent just across the board on offense and defense, and they got to the kicker, and it was like, man, Alabama can't have a better kicker than that. I mean, Alabama struggled with kickers trying to find the right one for a while. So maybe they are. Ohio State fans want to talk about, oh, we're the new Alabama. Well, maybe you are. Maybe you are, because you don't have a kicker, and you can't find one apparently. So Georgia and Alabama. So this was a little bit of a reckoning, so to speak. A little bit of a Georgia had to prove to themselves they could do it. And no, I mean like not beat Alabama by a field goal. Like Georgia had to prove that they could do this and beat Alabama by a considerable margin. And where did they do it? They were by far and away the more physical team. I mean, I saw a bunch of posts online about that. Like I saw some people put out there on Facebook that, like, man, Georgia is just so physical. Or the physicality of Georgia. That's true. Georgia clearly was the more physical team in this matchup. But I feel like your difference is Alabama's just way too one-dimensional. And this is exactly why, and spoiler alert, for the playoff, I'm just going to let y'all in on a little secret. This is exactly why I think Alabama's going to get bounced in the first round. They're going to lose to Oklahoma again because they cannot run the football. And we had a party last night. We had a tacky Christmas sweater party last night, right? We go there, and there's some people out there talking football, and one of them's like, well, Alabama, they're missing their running backs. And I said, who gives a crap, dude? They couldn't run when they had him. They haven't been able to run the football all year. They haven't been setting it on fire all year. They haven't ran the football good all year. They're out of the top 100 in the country in rushing yards. First time that's happened to an Alabama football team in a long time. So that's not, the hurt running back doesn't hurt Alabama as much as a lot of people thought last night. And we saw a lot of people talking about it. Well, Jam Miller's hurt. Who gives a crap? Jam Miller wasn't going to have 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. Stop kidding yourself. Y'all have to excuse me if y'all hear me sniffling, and I'm wiping my nose constantly. I guess I got some sinus stuff, or whatever. I don't know what it is, but constantly having to. That's why I'm taking these long pauses. I don't know if y'all can hear me, but I'm wiping my nose. It's running like crazy. It's not running like Alabama was last night. Had to throw that one in there. I walked to my fridge last night, and my distance from my couch to my fridge was more yards than Alabama rushed for last night. All right, I'm done. That's the last one. I'm not kidding. That's the last one. I'm not going to try to add insult to injury here. We're not going to do that. But Georgia, by far, the aggressor in this football game, by far from the get-go, took a few drives for Georgia to fill Alabama out, and both teams really too. But Georgia finally kind of got an idea of what they wanted to do on offense. They wanted to stay committed to the run. And, when you look at the fact that, it's 141 to -3, that's the biggest difference in the football game right there. Bama was way too one-dimensional. And this is the issue that I've had with Alabama over the last few weeks. This is a team that's been leaking oil for the last month, really. The Oklahoma game, they lost. This game, they've lost. Alabama's limping into the playoff. They're very banged up. They're very injured. Are they going to because if you haven't found a run game 13 games into the season, you're not going to find one. It's not like we're going to get to the playoff and then snap our fingers and Alabama's got a run game all of a sudden. That's not how this happens. You've seen some teams get better over the years. We talk about that with Georgia. This is a Georgia team that we saw them the last time they played Alabama. We saw a Georgia team that looked absolutely lost, like they were seeing ghosts. They were constantly turning around, hands up, palms, just shrugging their shoulders, like had no clue what was going on. We've saw this defense grow up and mature throughout the course of the season. Guys like Ellis Robinson, DeMello Jones, we've seen the emergence of some young players, had a lot of promise, had a lot of talent. We've seen those. Knew that was coming. Man. I hate sinuses. I hate my sinuses sometimes. But we've seen the emergence of these young players, right? And this is the difference in where Georgia's at and where Alabama. And there's not a better picture of the growth of these teams than what we saw Saturday night. We saw a team, Alabama, that was playing better football the last time these teams played, but now we've seen a team in Alabama that on the back half of this season has kind of tapered off a little bit, right? Leaking oil, kind of just not been playing as good. And then you see the gap of these two teams at this current state is presented to you in real time on Saturday night in Atlanta. But what a beatdown for, this was not what a lot of people expected, myself included. I was thinking, I was thinking Alabama was going to come in there and Georgia was going to come in there and Georgia was going to squeak out a close one, 27-24, like 3-point win, somewhere in that neighborhood. But for Georgia to just, this very well could have been 28-0. I mean, very well could have been 28-0. That drive Alabama drove down the field, Jeremy Bernard scores the touchdown there on the little pass from Ty Simpson. That was a drive that was aided by 2 15-yard penalties. So even then, they didn't really move all those yards. So could have very well been a 28-0 outcome in this football game. Just a dominant performance by Georgia. It's like I said earlier in the podcast. I don't care who it is. There's nobody in the country that would want to line up in front of that Georgia Bulldogs team right now. Just looking by the way that they played on Saturday, there's no team out there that wants to do it. And, they get the first round bye. Most likely going to be playing Ohio State. Most likely. I'm just saying the betting favorite currently is to see a Georgia-Ohio State matchup in the quarterfinals or semifinals, excuse me. That's the favorite. That's the betting odds right now. Have Georgia playing Ohio State in the semifinals for a chance to play in the national championship, which is a game we've all seen before, right? So definitely one we could very well see again. All in all, though, conference championship weekend, never disappointed. I don't know if y'all could tell, man. I do not feel good. So struggled through this episode, sitting here sniffling and, stuff running all out of my nose. And I've went through a whole box of tissues, I feel like, in this near 50 minutes. So dedicated, man, dedicated to y'all. And, y'all probably telling my voice if you're probably telling my voice that something's a little off. But either way, happy to do it, happy to record and happy to talk college football, everything else. But I'm going to make my little Irish goodbye, so to speak. Nah, I'm just kidding. Going to make my exit here and tell you, to enjoy, the rest of the the rest of the week. We will talk more. I will be back on same time, same everything. I will be back here on Thursday. There's no real, there's no games this upcoming weekend, but we will be on to preview a little bit more of the college football playoff, talk a little bit more about what we think is going to happen or what I think is going to happen. Maybe there's some drama, some news, some coaching carousel things that occur over the next few days. We'll be able to talk about on Thursday's episode. But until then, I will catch y'all later. Y'all enjoy your week, and I'll catch y'all next time on After the Whistle. Thanks, guys.